Stop starting with your knuckles. The first thing to trust is what you can see.
Before you touch a watermelon, look at what is already visible. Start with the pale patch where the melon rested against the ground. That's the field spot. On many watermelons lying on their side, you can see it immediately. A white or greenish-white field spot points toward earlier harvest. What you want to see is a developed creamy or buttery yellow. That doesn't measure sugar. What it tells you is that the fruit had more time to reach harvest maturity before it came off the vine. And there's another clue you can check without touching anything. Look at the rind itself. A mature watermelon tends to lose some of that slick, glossy shine and develop a duller, more matte finish. So before your hand ever reaches into the bin, you already have two useful visual checks: the field spot and the rind finish. But here's what separates a useful method from an internet trick. Neither one can guarantee sweetness. They help you identify maturity, and that distinction matters. The field spot is the first clue I would look for because it's one of the most consistently useful visual signs of harvest maturity. Don't treat it like a magic color code. The useful comparison is simple. White or greenish-white is a weaker maturity sign. Creamy yellow or buttery yellow is what you would rather see. On some lighter rind or pale striped varieties, the change may be less obvious. So if the spot looks faint on one of those cultivars, don't automatically reject the melon. Use the other clues with it. And if the field spot is hidden underneath, that's when a quick turn can give you more information. But by that point, your eyes should already have done the first work. That's the real idea behind this method. Look first, test second. Now look at the rest of the rind. A mature watermelon often loses some of its slick, glossy appearance and becomes duller. But don't use dullness alone. Dust, handling, and the natural appearance of different varieties can change how shiny a melon looks. So think of the rind finish as confirmation. A creamy yellow field spot plus a mature-looking duller rind gives you more confidence than either sign by itself. That's the pattern we're going to use throughout this video. Not one magic trick, several useful clues that agree. On some striped varieties, changes in the pattern near the blossom end can also appear as the fruit matures. The dark bands may become less crisp or begin to break up, but this is variety dependent. A solid-colored watermelon obviously isn't going to show the same change, so don't force one visual rule onto every cultivar. That's where a lot of watermelon advice goes wrong. The rule works on one type of melon, then gets repeated online as if it works on all of them. It doesn't. If you're growing watermelon yourself, you have one extra clue that grocery store shoppers usually don't. Look at the small curling tendril closest to where the fruit attaches to the vine. As the watermelon approaches maturity, that tendril often browns and dries. Useful clue, but not a perfect one. On some varieties, the tendril can begin browning before the fruit has reached its best harvest stage. So don't let one dry tendril overrule everything else. Use it with the field spot and rind appearance. When several signs agree, your decision becomes much stronger.
Now clear out the viral tricks. Some of the most repeated watermelon rules do not hold up.
Let's start with the male versus female watermelon claim. Watermelon vines do produce male and female flowers, but the fruit develops from female flowers. The harvested watermelons themselves are not male and female fruit. So the popular rule that round watermelons are female and sweeter, while long watermelons are male and watery, is not a dependable way to choose one. Round and elongated shapes are often simply differences between cultivars.
Then there's webbing. Those brown scars and rough-looking lines can look incredibly convincing in a viral graphic. You'll often see claims that heavy webbing automatically means more sugar. There isn't strong enough horticultural evidence to use that as a dependable sweetness rule. Interesting to notice? Sure. A reason to ignore stronger maturity clues? No. The same applies to the little blossom scar at the end of the watermelon, sometimes called the belly button. A large scar versus a small scar is not supported well enough to use as a reliable sweetness test. so don't let that little circle make the decision for you. And normal round versus oblong shape isn't a flavor code either. What I would avoid is a watermelon that's severely distorted, badly pinched, or obviously lopsided. That's different from simply being naturally round or elongated.
Here's the key. These signs show maturity. They do not guarantee a specific level of sweetness.
That's important because watermelon does not become meaningfully sweeter after you bring it home. Watermelon is a non-climacteric fruit. Once it's harvested, its sugar level does not continue increasing the way people sometimes expect. So if a watermelon was harvested too early, leaving it on the kitchen counter isn't going to magically load it with more sugar. That makes maturity at harvest especially important.
But even a properly mature watermelon isn't guaranteed to taste extraordinary. Variety matters. Growing conditions matter. Harvest timing matters. The outside of a watermelon can give us useful evidence about maturity. It cannot show us an exact sugar reading through the rind. And that's why I would rather use 2 or 3 evidence-supported clues together than trust one dramatic internet trick.
Once you've visually narrowed down the choices, then it makes sense to use your hands. The first confirmation I'd use is weight for size. Compare 2 watermelons of roughly similar size. The one that feels heavier generally contains more water and juice. That doesn't tell you exactly how sweet it is, but it can help you favor a well-filled, juicy fruit after the visual clues have already done most of the work. Notice the order: eyes first, hands second.
And finally, the famous thump. It's not completely meaningless, but it's also not the magic detector people sometimes make it sound like. Sound can change as a watermelon matures. The difficulty is interpreting that sound reliably with the human ear. A dull or muffled response can overlap between mature and overmature fruit.
And not every perfectly good watermelon produces the textbook sound people expect. That's why I wouldn't begin here. If 2 melons have already passed the visual checks and seem equally promising, you can use sound as one more piece of information. But I wouldn't let one knock overrule a good field spot and a mature rind.
3 melons, same size, same weight. Here's the one I'd choose first, and why.
Melon number 1 has a nice dull rind, but the exposed field spot is pale, almost white. That weak field spot matters more to me than the attractive rind. I'd pass on number 1.
Melon number 2 looks like something made for social media. Heavy webbing, plenty of scars, exactly the kind of melon a viral graphic might tell you to grab. But look closer. Its exposed field spot is faint, and the rind still looks fairly slick. The flashy clue isn't enough to overcome the weaker maturity signs. I'd leave number 2 as well.
Now, look at melon number 3. Nothing dramatic, no spectacular webbing, no special little belly button trick. It simply has a clearly developed creamy yellow field spot and a duller, mature-looking rind. The 2 strongest visual clues we're using agree with each other. That's the melon I would investigate first. Not because I can guarantee what the inside tastes like. I can't. But based on the external evidence, it's the strongest candidate of the 3. And that's a much better way to choose watermelon than hoping one knock tells you everything.
Eyes first, field spot first when you can see it, rind finish next. Then use weight, tendril, or even sound only as confirmation when they're available. Don't look for one magical watermelon trick. Look for several good signs pointing in the same direction. That's how you pick smarter before you ever cut it open.